Have you ever been in line at a store, just minding your own business, when something happens so unexpected, so out of pocket, that it makes your jaw drop and your heart race, like you're witnessing a moment that could either explode into chaos or change someone's life forever? Imagine this. You're standing in line at your local grocery store, the buzz of fluorescent lights humming overhead, people chatting about dinner plans, kids begging for candy in the checkout aisle. Everything feels so ordinary. But then, out of nowhere, a man starts yelling, loud, harsh, public. Not just raising his voice, but berating someone. And not just anyone. A teenager. A cashier. A kid who clearly looks like he's having a rough day already. His hands shake as he fumbles with the scanner, apologizing over and over, eyes darting nervously at the growing line of customers. And just when it seems like no one's going to say anything, just when the air gets so tense you can almost hear the collective discomfort of everyone too afraid to step in, an elderly woman in line behind the man takes one slow, deliberate step forward. What she does next, that moment, captured by a nearby shopper's phone, went viral across TikTok, YouTube Shorts, and even landed in national headlines. But what really happened that day? And why did it resonate with millions of viewers who couldn't stop watching, sharing, and commenting? You're here because you saw the title. Maybe the thumbnail caught your eye. But deep down, something else pulled you in. Something familiar. Because we've all seen someone get mistreated. We've all felt that gut-level twist of discomfort watching a stranger lash out in public, especially when the target is someone younger, someone vulnerable, someone who can't fight back. But what most of us haven't seen is someone step in with courage, wisdom, and timing so perfect, it shuts down the whole scene without a single ounce of rage. That's why you're here. And trust me, you're going to get the full story, the truth behind what happened, and the reason why this moment caught fire across America. But this isn't just a story about confrontation, it's about character. It's about the quiet power of people who refuse to stay silent when they see something wrong. It's about how kindness, when delivered at just the right time, can be more powerful than outrage. Now, I want you to do something for me. Pause whatever else you're doing. Lock in for just a few minutes. Because this isn't just another viral clip with a twist. It's a true story, and by the end of it, you're going to understand exactly why people across the country, people just like you, couldn't stop talking about this grandma in a cardigan who became an unexpected hero. And if you've ever felt helpless watching someone be mistreated in public, or wondered if it's even worth stepping in, what happens next might just change the way you think. Stick around, because every second of this story builds up to a moment you will not forget. And yes, we'll get to the part that went viral, but first, you need to see how it all unfolded, second by second. It started on a quiet Thursday afternoon in a mid-sized grocery store in Dayton, Ohio. Nothing fancy, just your regular community market where moms come to grab milk after work, retirees browse the produce section looking for deals, and high school kids work the registers for extra cash. The kind of place where everyone mostly keeps to themselves, polite nods exchanged over carts, small talk about the weather, nothing too deep. But underneath that layer of normalcy, something powerful was brewing. Behind checkout lane number 4, a teenage boy named Mason was doing his best to stay focused. He was just 17, still figuring out the ropes of his part-time job, and trying desperately to save up for college. You could see the tiredness in his eyes, the kind that doesn't come from staying up too late, but from the kind of stress that weighs on you when life at home is hard, and you feel like you have the whole world on your shoulders before you're even old enough to vote. He was new, still learning how to process coupons, bag items efficiently, and deal with the occasional impatient customer. That's when he showed up. The man in the wrinkled button-down, clearly in a rush, clearly irritated the second he stepped into the checkout line. Let's call him Brent. Tall, graying at the temples, one of those people who walks through life like the world owes him something. You know the type. As Mason scanned each item, Brent started tapping his foot, sighing loudly, glancing at his watch. And then came the moment where things snapped. One of the barcodes didn't scan. Mason apologized, tried to key it in manually, but his fingers slipped. That's when Brent lost it. His voice shot up, sharp and biting. Are you serious right now? Do you not know how to do your job? God, Why do they hire kids who can't even count change? The words sliced through the air like a knife. The people in line froze. No one moved. The kind of uncomfortable silence that screams louder than any argument. Mason's face turned red, his shoulders tensed, and for a second, he looked like he might cry. But he didn't. He just stood there, nodding, trying to keep it together. And the line stayed frozen. Everyone watching, but no one speaking. Except her. Directly behind Brent stood a woman in her late 70s. Hair silver, sweater buttoned neatly, glasses perched on the bridge of her nose. She clutched a small basket with just a few items: a carton of eggs, a loaf of bread, a pint of strawberries. Nothing about her looked like trouble. But looks can be deceiving. Because this grandma? She wasn't about to let this man ruin a kid's day. Not on her watch. She took one small step forward, leaned slightly closer, and calmly said something so sharp, so unexpected, that it made Brent's mouth snap shut and Mason's eyes widen in disbelief. The cashier paused. The line behind her went silent again, but this time for a completely different reason. What she said. What she did. Let's just say, it changed the atmosphere in that store like a thunderclap on a sunny day, and within 24 hours, the whole internet was talking about it. Now, before I tell you what those words were, before we get to the viral moment that turned this quiet grandma into an online sensation, I need you to understand something important. What happened that day wasn't just about one rude customer and one teenage cashier. It was about every person who's ever been pushed to the edge of quitting, every worker who's felt humiliated in silence, every bystander who's ever wanted to speak up but didn't know how. That's what makes this story more than just viral content. It's a mirror. And the reason it struck such a nerve across America is because it exposed something so raw, so real, that people couldn't scroll past it. They had to stop and watch it play out. The themes in this story touch everything we're dealing with right now: respect, kindness, the generational divide, how people treat service workers, and the quiet strength of those we often overlook. And that's why this story didn't just go viral, it became a conversation. On TikTok, it hit over 12 million views in less than 48 hours. On YouTube Shorts, it made the trending page. Thousands of comments poured in from people who saw their own kids, their own grandparents, their own selves in that exact moment. It sparked debates, reactions, and even inspired a follow-up video from the store's manager, who confirmed something that made the story even more incredible. But we'll get to that too. Right now, what you need to know is this. In the next few minutes, you're going to witness the exact moment that shifted the power in that grocery store. You're going to hear the words that turned a public shaming into a standing ovation. And you're going to see how a quiet act of courage from a woman with nothing to prove gave a lesson in grace, backbone, and justice that no one saw coming, not even the man she shut down. So stay with me, because this isn't just a story. It's a moment you'll carry with you. And when we come back, I'll walk you through what Grandma said, why Brent couldn't even respond, and how that teenage cashier's life took a turn he never expected, all because someone behind him refused to stay silent. And just when you think you know how this ends, trust me, you don't. What you might not have seen at first glance, and what didn't make the quick viral clips, was just how much was swirling beneath the surface for Mason, the teen cashier caught in the crossfire. That day at the grocery store wasn't just a random Tuesday afternoon where a rude customer lost his patience. No, for Mason, it was a pressure cooker moment built on weeks of sleepless nights, worries about college applications, and a family situation that had been unraveling for months. You see, Mason wasn't just working to make a little extra cash. He was carrying the weight of a responsibility far heavier than a scanner or a cash register. His mother had recently lost her job due to company layoffs, and with his father long gone from the picture, Mason had become the unofficial man of the house. He was balancing school, working part-time shifts, and trying to keep his little sister on track while his mom dealt with mounting bills and the stress that came with it. Every shift at the store felt like more than just a job. It was a lifeline. And that's why, when Brent started yelling at him, it wasn't just about a missed barcode. It felt like the world was piling on just when Mason was about to break. But if you think the man in line was just some random jerk having a bad day, think again. Brent, as a regular at that store, had been showing signs of frustration for a while. Some shoppers whispered about his sharp temper, while others recalled a recent string of bad luck in his life. Rumors of losing a promotion at work, arguments with his adult son, and even whispers that his health wasn't what it used to be. Those pieces began to emerge like shadows in the background, a tangled web that made the moment between Brent and Mason more complicated than just customer versus cashier. People in the neighborhood talked about Brent's frequent visits to the store late at night, sometimes appearing distracted, sometimes talking on the phone in a harsh tone that suggested things at home were far from peaceful. Could this have been a breaking point for him? Was he really just a bully lashing out, or was something else driving his bitterness that day? At the same time, there was another figure in this story who caught attention but rarely made it into the viral clips: the grandmother herself. Her name was Evelyn, a woman who lived just a few blocks from the store and was known in her community as someone fiercely protective of the younger generation. Evelyn wasn't your typical quiet senior citizen who minded her own business. She was a retired schoolteacher, sharp as a tack and well-respected by neighbors for her volunteer work with youth programs and her no-nonsense attitude toward injustice. Some who knew her recalled stories of Evelyn standing up for students who faced bullying or unfair treatment. So when she stepped forward that day, it wasn't just a spontaneous act. It was a culmination of years of experience watching people suffer in silence and a refusal to be a bystander. Still, there was an odd tension in Evelyn's posture that day, something subtle but noticeable. A flicker of hesitation in her eyes before she spoke, as if she was weighing the risks of what she was about to do. And that's where the story deepens. Was Evelyn protecting Mason because she saw herself in him? Was she stepping in for justice? Or was there an even more personal history between her and Brent? Neighborhood gossip hinted at a long-standing feud, something about a property dispute, a disagreement that had escalated years ago but never quite resolved. This added a layer of uncertainty. Was this encounter purely about defending a teenager, or was it the latest chapter in a complicated, simmering conflict between two strong-willed people? Meanwhile, Mason's co-workers noticed a strange pattern in the days leading up to the incident. One of them mentioned that Mason had been receiving anonymous text messages, cryptic and unsettling, urging him to quit the job or be careful about who's watching. This little detail sent ripples of suspicion throughout the store staff. Who could have sent those messages? Was it someone connected to Brent? Or perhaps someone else entirely? And then there was the manager, a woman named Lisa, who seemed unusually tight-lipped when asked about the incident. She acknowledged the viral video but refused to comment on the personal lives involved, adding fuel to speculation that there was much more beneath the surface than just a rude customer and a heroic grandma. With so many threads pulling in different directions, the stressed teen fighting to keep his life afloat, the bitter man harboring his own demons, and the grandmother with a mysterious past and a sharp tongue, the story became a puzzle no one in that checkout line could have predicted. Was this a simple case of standing up to a bully? Or was it a much deeper, tangled story about pain, resilience, and years of unspoken history finally bursting into the open? Viewers began debating fiercely online, weighing every detail. Some sided with Brent, arguing that everyone has a breaking point. Others praised Evelyn as a symbol of strength. And most felt their hearts break for Mason, the young man stuck in the middle of it all. And yet, even as the comments poured in, a nagging question remained unanswered. What exactly did Evelyn say to Brent that silenced him so completely? What was it about her words that stopped the angry man in his tracks and changed the mood of the store in an instant? The answer lies just ahead, but before we get there, you need to hear about the moments leading up to that confrontation, the subtle exchanges, the tension in the air, and the surprising revelation about a third person who entered the store that day and might have tipped the scales in an unexpected way. Because this story is far from over, and every detail matters if you want to understand why a simple grocery store line became the setting for one of the most talked about moments of the year. Just when it seemed like the pieces might start falling into place, everything took an unexpected turn that only deepened the mystery and made Mason's situation even more complicated. You see, right after the viral video blew up, some crucial evidence, something that could have explained a lot about what happened that day, vanished without a trace. The store's security footage, which showed the full interaction from start to finish, mysteriously disappeared from the system. At first, it was reported as a technical glitch, something easily blamed on faulty equipment. But those who knew Mason or worked at the store weren't convinced. This footage was the key to understanding the true nature of the confrontation and the grandmother's surprising intervention. Without it, the story relied on shaky memories, viral clips edited by strangers, and gossip that only added confusion. Mason himself felt the sting of this loss acutely. He'd hoped the video would clear his name and maybe even show a side of Brent and Evelyn no one had considered before. Now, that chance seemed to be slipping away, as if someone wanted the truth buried. Then, just when Mason tried to dig deeper, he was met with an ominous warning. One afternoon, after his shift, an unfamiliar man approached him outside the store. His tone was polite but serious, and his words carried a heavy weight. Some things are better left alone. You're stirring up trouble that won't just go away. Think carefully before you dig any deeper. Mason didn't recognize the man, and his sudden appearance raised more questions than answers. Was this a threat from Brent's side? Or was it connected to something else entirely? The warning planted a seed of doubt and fear in Mason's mind, making him question whether uncovering the full story was worth the risk. But backing down wasn't really an option, not when so much was on the line for him and his family. Yet, that moment marked a turning point, where the simple story of a rude customer and a heroic grandma became tangled with shadows and secrets that no one expected. Adding another layer to this tangled web was the revelation of a secret from Evelyn's past, something she'd kept tightly guarded for years. According to a few quiet whispers in the neighborhood, Evelyn once had a close relationship with Brent that went far beyond casual acquaintance. They were said to have been friends decades ago, back when the neighborhood was a very different place, before life pulled them in opposite directions. But the friendship ended badly, with a betrayal that no one talked about openly. Some claimed it involved a dispute over family matters. Others hinted at financial troubles and harsh words exchanged that left a lasting scar on both sides. This history suddenly made Evelyn's fierce defense of Mason seem more complicated. Was she just standing up for the kid, or was she settling old scores with Brent? And if that was true, how much of their argument was about Mason or the grocery store incident, and how much was about the ghosts from their shared past? That old wound, kept secret for so long, threatened to pull the entire story off course and turn public opinion against both of them. Meanwhile, Mason noticed that not everyone around him was on his side. Lisa, the store manager who had seemed supportive, started acting strangely distant. She stopped returning his calls and avoided conversations about the incident whenever other staff were around. What was stranger was how some coworkers, once friendly, began whispering behind his back, questioning his version of events. Rumors began swirling that Mason might have been partly responsible for the tension, that maybe he'd been rude or careless with Brent before things exploded. It felt like a slow unraveling of trust, and Mason couldn't help but wonder if someone was deliberately spreading misinformation to undermine him. But who would want to do that?
And why?
Was Lisa hiding something? Was there a bigger agenda at play in that seemingly ordinary grocery store? Those questions only made the environment feel more suffocating and hostile, turning Mason's fight for truth into an uphill battle filled with unseen enemies. Just when you think you've got a handle on the situation, an unexpected ally appeared, or so it seemed. A man named Chris, who introduced himself as a local journalist interested in telling Mason's side of the story, reached out with offers to help. His friendly demeanor and quick promises of support made Mason hopeful for the first time in weeks. But there was something about Chris that felt off. Maybe it was the way he pushed Mason to share details too quickly, or how he seemed oddly eager to highlight the more dramatic, emotional parts of the story without waiting for facts to settle. And some of Mason's closest friends whispered their doubts, warning him not to trust someone who might have his own motives. Was Chris genuinely on Mason's side? Or was he another piece in a puzzle designed to twist the narrative and fuel controversy? Mason had no easy answers, only a growing sense that the people around him might not be who they appeared to be. As tension mounted, the community around the store fractured into factions. Some saw Mason as a symbol of resilience, a young man standing tall against injustice and cruelty. Others viewed Brent as a victim of circumstances beyond his control, a man pushed too far and finally breaking under the weight. And Evelyn, caught in the middle of decades-old grudges and new confrontations, became both a protector and a wild card, her true motives still hidden beneath layers of complexity. Each new day brought fresh rumors, new challenges, and yet more questions. What was the real story behind that viral moment? Who was telling the truth? And what forces were working to keep the answers out of reach? The story that started as a brief clash in a grocery store line had evolved into a tangled drama of secrets, threats, and shifting alliances, one that no one could predict or control. And just when it felt like Mason might finally uncover the truth, the ground shifted beneath him once again. Because there's one last twist, one piece of the puzzle that doesn't fit, a clue that turns everything upside down and forces us all to ask, who's really pulling the strings behind the scenes? What you're about to discover next will change everything you thought you knew. Stick around, because this story is far from over, and the real truth is darker and more surprising than anyone expected. Just when you thought the tangled web surrounding Mason, Brent, and Evelyn couldn't get any more complicated, another layer began to unfold that pulled even more people into the shadowy depths of this mystery. It started with Mason's younger sister, Lily, who had been mostly kept out of the spotlight until now. Quiet and reserved, Lily had been juggling school and helping at home, but then she, too, received a cryptic message, one that mirrored the threatening note Mason had gotten weeks earlier. It wasn't just a coincidence. The message warned her to stay silent, to stop asking questions that don't belong to her, and that pushing further would bring consequences far worse than anyone anticipated. This sudden intrusion into Lily's life turned the whole story upside down, signaling that whatever was going on wasn't just about Mason's struggle or Brent's temper. It was bigger, darker, and far-reaching, touching multiple lives in ways no one had imagined. Meanwhile, a new piece of evidence emerged from an unexpected source, one that contradicted everything the public had come to believe about that viral confrontation. An anonymous tip sent to a local news outlet claimed there was a third party involved that day, someone who had been standing just outside the camera's frame and whose actions had a direct impact on how the events unfolded. According to this source, there had been a heated exchange earlier in the store between Brent and this individual, a dispute that no one at the checkout line was aware of, but that could explain Brent's explosive behavior. The tip hinted at a history between Brent and this shadowy figure, involving old debts and personal grudges that had simmered below the surface for years. Suddenly, what looked like a simple case of customer frustration morphed into something more sinister, involving secrets that were deliberately being kept out of sight. But who was this third person? And why had they stayed hidden while the drama played out in front of everyone? This new revelation sent ripples through the community, shaking the foundations of what people thought they knew. Friends and neighbors began questioning their assumptions about Brent and Evelyn, wondering if they were just pawns in a larger game. The neighborhood's trust fractured, suspicions spreading like wildfire. Some whispered that Brent might have been set up, while others speculated that Evelyn's fierce defense was part of a long-planned move to protect someone else entirely. Mason's closest allies grew wary, unsure if they could truly rely on the people around them. Every conversation felt charged with unspoken doubts, and every glance carried the weight of hidden meanings. Even Mason himself began doubting whether he was the one being targeted, or if he was caught in the crossfire of a deeper, more dangerous conflict. As the stakes rose, the mysterious journalist Chris became even more active, digging aggressively for information but often sidestepping key questions or refusing to share his sources. His involvement, once seen as a potential lifeline, now raised red flags among Mason's circle. Was Chris genuinely helping, or was he playing a dangerous game of his own? Could he be working for someone who wanted to control the narrative, shape public opinion, or keep certain truths buried? The line between friend and foe blurred, making it impossible to tell who had Mason's best interests at heart. Every interaction carried an undercurrent of tension, as if anyone could be hiding a motive that might shatter everything Mason believed. And just when it seemed like the pressure couldn't get any greater, Evelyn received an unexpected visitor one late evening, a woman from her past whose sudden reappearance sent shockwaves through Evelyn's carefully guarded world. This visitor brought reminders of old secrets, betrayals, and unresolved debts that stretched back decades, threatening to undo everything Evelyn had built. Her calm exterior cracked just enough to reveal the weight of guilt and fear she'd been carrying. Could this visitor hold the key to the tangled past between Evelyn and Brent? Or was she another player in a game where the rules were constantly changing? The deeper Evelyn's story went, the less anyone could be certain about her true intentions. As these parallel threads wove together, the story transformed into a complex dance of hidden motives, unspoken threats, and fractured loyalties. The community that once rallied around Mason now found itself caught in a storm of uncertainty, where every truth uncovered only seemed to raise more questions. The very people who seemed most trustworthy suddenly appeared to have secrets worth hiding, and the line between victim and villain blurred into an indistinguishable haze. The viral moment that sparked this entire saga was no longer just about a man yelling at a teen cashier or a brave grandmother stepping in. It had become a battleground where the stakes were far higher than anyone imagined, and where every move could change the outcome in unpredictable ways. And just as you think you're getting close to understanding what's really going on, a final, unsettling twist comes into view, one that challenges everything you thought you knew about the people involved, their pasts, and the truth that's still waiting to be uncovered. The story isn't just unfolding, it's exploding, and it's about to take a turn that no one saw coming. So stay with me, because what happens next will push this mystery to its breaking point, and the truth that emerges will shock you more than any viral video ever could. Just as Mason thought he could start catching his breath and make sense of the chaos, the darkness that had been quietly gathering around him exploded into something far more urgent and terrifying. One evening, after a long day filled with whispered warnings and strained conversations, Mason sensed the unmistakable feeling of being watched. It wasn't just his imagination. Every shadow seemed to stretch longer, every unfamiliar car parked nearby too still, and every passing stranger's glance a little too knowing. The safety he once felt was slipping away, replaced by a cold, creeping fear that no amount of reason could chase off. He caught glimpses of a figure following him at a distance, always just out of reach, but never far enough to ignore. The familiar streets he walked daily suddenly transformed into a maze of hidden threats, and with every step, Mason's heart pounded louder. Not just out of exhaustion, but because he realized this wasn't about a viral video anymore. This was about his very survival. Adding to his growing panic, Lily, his sister who had already been dragged unwillingly into this nightmare, suddenly vanished without a trace. It was as if she had been erased from the world, leaving behind only a hastily scrawled note that warned Mason to stop his search, or else she would pay the price. The fear that gripped Mason wasn't just about losing his sister, but the chilling realization that whoever was behind this had the power to reach into his life and take away the people he loved most. He replayed every interaction, every warning, every subtle threat he'd brushed off before, now seeing them in a new, deadly light. How deep did this go? Who could orchestrate such cold intimidation with such ease? The line between reality and paranoia blurred as Mason's mind spun with questions, doubts, and what-ifs. The community that had once buzzed with gossip and speculation felt distant and unsafe, like a stage where he was the unwilling actor in a script written by an unseen hand. Mason's thoughts were a storm of fear and determination. He knew backing down wasn't an option, but every step toward the truth seemed to pull him further into danger's grip. Sleep became elusive as his mind raced with memories of Evelyn's guarded glances and Brent's bitter words. What secrets were they hiding that could make someone disappear so effortlessly? The chilling silence that followed Lily's disappearance was suffocating, punctuated only by the ringing of his phone, calls from unknown numbers that ended abruptly, or whispered threats from voices he couldn't place. It was clear this wasn't just about clearing his name anymore. It was a desperate fight to protect what little remained of his family and his sanity. The viral moment that had thrust Mason into the spotlight now felt like a distant echo compared to the real nightmare unfolding behind closed doors. Even those who once seemed like allies now looked different through the lens of fear. Mason found himself questioning every smile, every gesture, every word spoken with too much eagerness or too much silence. The journalist, Chris, whose intentions had already seemed questionable, vanished without a trace just as Mason needed him most, leaving behind unanswered questions and a trail of confusion. Was Chris involved in the threats? Or had he been scared off by something even darker lurking beneath the surface? The mystery deepened with every unanswered call, every closed door, and every fleeting shadow in the night. Mason's world shrank to a claustrophobic space where trust was a luxury he could no longer afford. And just when the weight of the unknown seemed unbearable, a direct threat arrived, this time unmistakably personal and chilling in its clarity. A package left on Mason's doorstep contained a single photo, Lily, wide-eyed and clearly scared, but alive for now. Attached was a note that cut through any remaining hope. "Stop digging, or this is the last time you see her." The message was clear and brutal, shaking Mason to his core but fueling a fire of resolve deeper than fear. The stakes had never been higher, and the lines between friend and foe blurred into a fog thick with danger and deception. The question now wasn't just who was behind this, but what they wanted, and how far they were willing to go to keep the truth buried. In that moment, Mason understood that his story was no longer just about a viral video or a grocery store confrontation. It was a deadly puzzle with missing pieces, hidden threats, and lives hanging in the balance. The answers he sought might come at a cost he wasn't sure he was ready to pay, but he knew one thing for certain. The silence that followed could mean the end, and the truth he chased was more dangerous than he ever imagined. What happens next will change everything, and the only way forward is to face the shadows head-on, no matter the price. Just when Mason thought he had grasped the full scope of the nightmare unraveling around him, everything shifted in a way that made him, and everyone watching the story, question everything from the ground up. It happened late one night, as Mason sat alone in his dimly lit apartment, replaying every clue, every warning, and every fleeting memory, desperately trying to piece together the puzzle that had swallowed his life whole. That's when his phone buzzed again, this time with a video message unlike any other, a grainy clip sent from an unknown number that wasn't just a threat, but a revelation. In the shaky footage, someone Mason never suspected appeared, Evelyn. The grandmother who had so valiantly stood up in the store, the woman whose courage had gone viral and inspired thousands, was not the protector Mason thought she was. Instead, Evelyn's voice, calm but icy, confessed to orchestrating much more than just a moment of bravery. She revealed that she'd been aware of the threats long before Mason was, that she had been quietly watching, manipulating, even setting events into motion to protect something far bigger than any of them realized, a secret tied to her own past, one that involved betrayal, lies, and dangerous alliances that stretched far beyond their small town. This twist didn't just flip the story on its head, it shattered the foundation Mason had been clinging to. The woman who seemed like a savior now emerged as a puppeteer with a hidden agenda, her actions casting a shadow over everything that had unfolded. Why had she stepped in that day at the checkout line? Was it truly to defend Mason, or to steer the narrative away from truths she feared would surface? The realization hit Mason like a punch to the gut. The viral video that sparked all this chaos was not an innocent snapshot of a random act of kindness, but a calculated move in a game where everyone was a pawn, and Evelyn was playing for keeps. Her revelation painted every character in a new light. Brent's anger, the anonymous threats, the sudden disappearances, they all seemed like carefully orchestrated parts of a larger scheme. And worst of all, Evelyn warned Mason to stop digging deeper, not just for his safety, but because some truths were so dangerous, they could destroy more than just reputations. They could ruin lives. Mason's mind raced as he tried to absorb this staggering new reality. Could he trust anyone anymore? Had his sister's disappearance been part of Evelyn's plan? What was the secret Evelyn had been hiding that made her willing to manipulate those closest to her? The fear that had once been about external threats now twisted inward, turning Mason's own circle into a labyrinth of suspicion and betrayal. Friends whispered about Evelyn's past connections to powerful figures, her involvement in controversies that had been quietly buried, and rumors of debts that went beyond money, debts that demanded loyalty and silence at any cost. The truth was no longer a simple narrative of victim and hero. It was a complex web where every ally could be an adversary and every motive was suspect. As Mason grappled with this upheaval, another unexpected figure stepped forward, a stranger who claimed to have been a friend of Evelyn's for decades. This new arrival brought documents, photographs, and recordings that further complicated the story, suggesting that Evelyn's motivations were intertwined with a shadowy network of influence and control that stretched far beyond their small town. Suddenly, the stakes weren't just personal. They were political, social, and deeply rooted in a system designed to keep certain truths hidden. Mason's fight for justice now felt like a battle against a faceless, sprawling force determined to silence anyone who dared to uncover its secrets. This major twist didn't just change the story, it changed how everyone watching had to see it. The viral video, once a snapshot of courage and confrontation, now looked like the opening move in a high-stakes game of deception and power. Every character's role was rewritten, and the mystery deepened to a point where certainty became impossible. The question was no longer who was right or wrong, but who was truly in control, and whether Mason could outsmart forces far bigger than himself before it was too late. The truth was buried deeper than anyone imagined, and as this revelation settled like a storm cloud over the story, it became clear that what happened next would defy all expectations and leave everyone questioning the reality they thought they knew. Mason's world unraveled faster than he ever imagined possible, and with Evelyn's shocking confession still echoing in his mind, he found himself trapped in a tightening noose of impossible choices that tore at his heart and soul. The woman he'd admired, the grandmother who seemed like the town's last beacon of hope, was now the epicenter of a web of lies, and Mason's trust felt like fragile glass ready to shatter at any moment. But the real pain came when he was forced to confront the one person he thought would never betray him, his sister Lily. After days of silence, she reappeared, but not as the frightened victim he had hoped to find. Instead, she confronted Mason with a cold, hard ultimatum: stop digging into Evelyn's past or risk losing everything, including each other. The look in her eyes was no longer that of a scared girl, but of someone caught in a storm she could no longer escape, someone who had made choices Mason couldn't understand, and perhaps choices he could never forgive. This moment shattered Mason's fragile hope for an easy resolution and plunged him deeper into a maze of emotional turmoil where loyalty, love, and survival collided in painful conflict. Lily's words weren't just a warning. They were a plea from someone forced to live between shadows and secrets, and Mason's heart ached knowing that the sister he once knew was slipping further away into a world he barely recognized. To protect her, to save himself, Mason had to decide if exposing Evelyn's secrets, and by extension, the entire toxic network she was part of, was worth losing the last pieces of his family. But what scared him more was the growing realization that if he stopped, the darkness surrounding them wouldn't vanish. It would only grow stronger, feeding on silence and fear, ready to strike again with more devastating consequences. The tension wasn't just external, but seeping into Mason's very soul, twisting every decision into a battle between conscience and self-preservation. He was torn between revealing the truth that could shatter lives or protecting those he loved from a world too cruel and complex to fight alone. When an anonymous message arrived, offering Mason safety in exchange for his silence, it wasn't just a temptation, it was a test of everything he stood for. The price was clear: walk away from the truth, leave the past buried, and live with the weight of what could have been. But Mason's mind refused to accept such an easy escape. Every fiber of his being screamed that the real danger wasn't just in what was hidden, but in what people were willing to do to keep those secrets locked away forever. As the days passed, the line between friend and foe blurred even more. Mason found himself looking over his shoulder, questioning the motives of those closest to him, each smile now a mask, each word a potential lie. Even Evelyn's earlier acts of courage felt twisted under this new light, and Mason wrestled with the terrifying thought that he might be fighting a losing battle against forces far beyond his control. The emotional weight of these impossible choices weighed heavily on him, dragging him into sleepless nights filled with doubt, fear, and a desperate hope for a breakthrough that seemed just out of reach. The story was no longer just about a viral moment or a grocery store confrontation. It had become a personal war, where every choice carried devastating consequences, and the truth, no matter how powerful, came with a price few were prepared to pay. In this relentless storm, Mason realized the stakes were higher than ever before, and the coming days would force him to confront the darkest parts of his own heart and the murky depths of those around him. The ultimate question loomed large. How far was he willing to go to uncover a truth that might destroy everything he held dear? And more importantly, could he live with what he would lose in the process? The answer was nowhere near clear, and as Mason faced the impossible, the only certainty was that nothing would ever be the same again. Mason barely had time to catch his breath before the full weight of the conspiracy crashed down on him like a freight train, shaking the very ground beneath his feet. What had started as a tense, confusing situation involving a viral video and a grandmother's unexpected bravery was now revealed as a sprawling, tangled web of deception that reached far beyond anything he had imagined. The truth wasn't just about Evelyn's secret past or the threats to his family. It was a powerful network of people embedded in the town's highest circles, pulling strings in ways that made Mason's head spin. The local police, trusted neighbors, even longtime friends were all wrapped up in a game of manipulation and control, each with their own hidden motives and alliances. And just when Mason thought he could trust no one, the one person he leaned on the most, the quiet friend who had stood by him through every twist, betrayed him in a moment so brutal it felt like a knife twisting in his chest. It was during a late-night meeting, one that Mason thought would finally bring clarity, that the devastating truth came out. His friend revealed they had been working with the very people Mason had been fighting against, feeding information back to those who wanted the truth buried forever. The shock was so immense that Mason felt the air leave his lungs, replaced by a surge of adrenaline-fueled panic. This betrayal wasn't just personal, it was proof of how deep and wide the conspiracy ran, how carefully it was crafted to trap anyone who dared to uncover it. Every whispered warning, every disappeared clue, every veiled threat suddenly made sense. The danger wasn't just real, it was imminent. And now, Mason was right in the crosshairs. With the clock ticking, Mason was forced into a high-stakes game where every move mattered, and one wrong step could cost him everything. The tension was electric as he pieced together clues that revealed a secret alliance between powerful figures who wanted control over the town's future, using intimidation and silence to maintain their grip. The stakes were no longer just about family or personal survival. They were about exposing a truth that could ignite a reckoning, tearing apart a community that had long been held hostage by corruption. Every encounter, every conversation crackled with urgency and suspicion, and Mason's world blurred into a relentless rush of emotions: fear, betrayal, determination, and a desperate hope that justice could still win. In this whirlwind of revelations, Mason realized the fight ahead would be unlike anything he'd ever faced. The line between friend and enemy was gone, replaced by a brutal clarity. To survive, to protect those he loved, he had to outsmart a shadowy force that was always one step ahead. The pressure was crushing, the danger immediate, and the consequences more devastating than Mason ever imagined. As the pieces fell into place, the story that had captivated thousands online became a living nightmare, a race against time, against betrayal, and against a conspiracy that threatened to consume everything in its path. And just when Mason thought he was ready for the final showdown, the ground shifted once more, leaving everyone watching on edge, breathless, and desperate to know what would happen next. The moment Mason had been hurtling toward, the one that had haunted his every waking thought, finally exploded into a collision of raw emotions, desperate truths, and high-stakes confrontation. Standing face to face with Evelyn, the grandmother whose quiet strength had once inspired him but now carried the weight of dark secrets, Mason felt his heart pound like thunder in his chest. The room felt impossibly small, the air thick with tension as the years of hidden betrayals and whispered lies all converged in this one unbearable instant. Evelyn's eyes, once warm and reassuring, now held a cold steeliness that sent a shiver down Mason's spine. She was no longer the victim or hero he thought he knew, but a mastermind tangled deeply in the town's shadowy power plays. She wasn't just protecting herself or her family anymore. She was protecting a legacy built on control, fear, and ruthless deception. In that charged silence, Mason pushed forward, his voice shaking but steady as he laid out everything he had uncovered. The manipulated evidence, the allies turned enemies, the threats aimed at silencing him and his loved ones. Evelyn didn't flinch. Instead, a sad, almost resigned smile crossed her face as if she had been waiting for this moment, knowing the damage it would do, but believing it was inevitable. Their battle was no longer just words, but a psychological war, each trying to outmaneuver the other with memories, accusations, and chilling truths. Mason's desperation to save his family and expose the corruption collided with Evelyn's cold calculation to keep the empire she'd built intact. Around them, shadows seemed to close in, the weight of years pressing down until the fragile balance between justice and ruin tipped with a violent shudder. Then came the explosive revelation. A hidden piece of evidence Mason hadn't expected, slipped to him by a mysterious ally whose identity had been shrouded in doubt from the beginning. This final clue shattered everything. It revealed not only Evelyn's deeper involvement, but also exposed a second puppet master, someone Mason had trusted implicitly, pulling the strings from behind the scenes with a darker agenda. The betrayal cut deeper than anything before, leaving Mason staggered as the truth tore apart his understanding of loyalty and love. The air crackled with electric tension as the walls closed in, and Mason realized the fight wasn't just for his family or the town. It was a battle for the very soul of everyone involved. In the crescendo of chaos and heartbreak, Mason faced an impossible choice: expose everything and risk destroying lives beyond repair, or bury the truth to protect those who still clung to hope. The room seemed to spin as the weight of that decision crushed down, every heartbeat a reminder that there was no going back. Just when the tension seemed unbearable, a final, shocking twist shattered the fragile peace, an unexpected confession from Evelyn that turned the entire story upside down, revealing that some sacrifices had been made not out of greed or fear, but from a twisted sense of protection and love. The revelation didn't solve the mystery, it deepened it, leaving Mason and the audience suspended on the edge of an abyss, wondering what justice truly meant in a world where right and wrong blurred in the shadows. As the screen fades, the question lingers: who can you truly trust when everyone has something to hide, and how far would you go to protect the ones you love, even if it means becoming the very thing you fear? The answers remain locked in the silence, begging for a sequel, a reckoning, or perhaps a new beginning. In the quiet aftermath of the storm Mason had weathered, a fragile peace settled over the tangled mess of secrets, betrayals, and shattered trust. The town's dusty streets seemed calmer now, but the weight of everything that had transpired lingered like a shadow just beyond reach, reminding Mason that some scars run deeper than time can heal. He had uncovered the truth, the dark undercurrents that ran beneath the smiles of neighbors and the polite nods of longtime friends. And though justice had taken its first steps, the full reckoning was far from over. Evelyn's confession, that final twist born from a complicated web of love and fear, left Mason grappling with a truth more nuanced than the black and white lines he had once believed in. It wasn't simply a battle between good and evil, but a story of flawed humans making impossible choices in the name of protection and survival. Though Mason had brought the hidden puppet masters into the light, some questions remained stubbornly unanswered, echoing in the quiet spaces of his mind like a riddle with no final key. The people he once trusted had fractured beyond repair, alliances had shifted like sand beneath his feet, and the notion of safety felt more fragile than ever. Yet, through the chaos, Mason found a sliver of something precious, a sense of clarity that came from facing darkness head-on and refusing to let it define him or his family. He began to rebuild, cautiously but with a renewed purpose, understanding that while the past could not be undone, the future was still a canvas waiting to be painted with honesty, courage, and resilience. His journey became a testament to the strength it takes to stand up not only to others, but also to the demons within ourselves. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the town that had been both his battleground and sanctuary, Mason looked out over a world forever changed by the revelations he had unearthed. The viral video that had started it all was now a symbol of something much bigger, a reminder that sometimes the smallest moments, the quiet acts of courage from unexpected places like a grandmother standing up in line, can ignite a fire that exposes truths no one wants to see. The story had unfolded in ways no one could have predicted, weaving together mystery, betrayal, and heartbreak, yet it also revealed the enduring power of human connection and the complicated choices we make in the face of fear. And though the final chapter had been written, the echoes of this story would ripple far beyond, leaving a haunting question hanging in the air. In a world full of shadows, how do we find the light that guides us home? For those watching now, Mason's journey isn't just a tale confined to one small town or a viral moment on the internet. It's a mirror reflecting the challenges we all face in seeking truth, justice, and peace amidst a world of uncertainty. It asks us to consider who we trust, what we believe, and how far we're willing to go to protect what matters most. The answers may not be simple, and the ending may not be neat, but the story lingers, a reminder that every voice, every act of bravery, no matter how quiet or unexpected, has the power to change everything. And so, as the screen fades to black, we're left not just with closure, but with a challenge to look closer, listen harder, and never stop searching for the stories hidden just beneath the surface.